I wanted tonight, actually, I had a revelation this afternoon that the last, all of October, a couple of our sessions in September, all really centered around the theme of personal theologies. That was not planned. Ironically, I had the specific personal theologies things planned with Bryant, but I didn't, it just kind of, I worked on the calendar and plugged people in where I could plug them in, and just kind of randomly thought these are some of the things we've talked about doing. Thank you. And so I was thinking about how here's Tom. I was thinking about how everything that we've done, like talking through Jim's last session and some of these others, with obviously more specifically was Jay's personal, what he called process Christology. But even Rick and I were talking about what's coming down the pipe here in a few weeks. He's going to be doing the one, if you notice the calendar, it says, are we living in a simulation? There are people that believe that, kind of Matrix-like, if you're familiar with that movie. And so I started realizing that we really just kind of got this whole, in a sense, a series, unplanned series of looking at what people believe and how they believe in all these really radically different ways, which is exciting to me. But I just, it is exciting to kind of circle back around that this one, because we're also doing this series of all of the Ekklesia Tenets through coming into the winter time. I wanted to take each tenet and kind of dive into each one of those. And so I think it's wonderful that the first tenet of love unconditionally fell tonight in the midst of these personal theologies, because I think from my vantage point, I think we all agree that that is a wonderful personal theology, is just to have a theology of love. And so now Jeffrey had done the way of love and started talking about Thomas and some other folks in the Bible last summer. And I thought, well, if we're going to talk about love, and he also had some great thoughts about when Rick led it on how do I love my neighbor if I don't love myself? That was that theme. And so I said, let's get Jeffrey back to do this with us and dive a little bit more into love as a personal theology, more specifically unconditional love. And I would like to say, I'm gonna put it for a vote, but I really think that we should update this first tenet in our Ekklesia official tenets on the website. Right now, it reads the way we wrote it 4.5 years ago when we first started, and we just thought we were going to be a new form of church. And so it reads very biblically as love God, love each other, and self unconditionally. But I think for our purposes of where we are today, I think it would be more inclusive and more fitting if we just simply say love unconditionally. And so I'm going to propose that, but just for sake tonight, anybody agree with me that we could just say love unconditionally and not quantify to whom? Okay, good. So we've got some good feedback there. So I'll bring that up to the board when we get back together. So, but that said, I think tonight is a perfect time to kind of start thinking in that vein. Is it really, what does that look like? Because sometimes we think in terms of those that are hard to love. Jeffrey's going to lead us through some great stories about that, and some things I hadn't thought of before. But I wanted to get us thinking first and foremost at the beginning tonight about the Ekklesia Tenets, and particularly loving unconditionally. And how has that resonated with you coming into a group like this? How important is that to you in how you live your life? And I'm hoping that tonight we get some other inspiration through stories and sharing that may help us with some of the more challenging ways to be loving in unconditional ways. So that said, I will pass it to Jeffrey.
All right. Let's open with a word of prayer. God, who is love, and love who surrounds us, we invoke your presence. We invoke your kindness, your gentleness, your peace. Let us love one another tonight. Amen. Okay. So, so we talked a little bit about last time about Thomas, and we're going to talk some more about the way of love, part 2. Let me see if I'm on the right page. I'm on the right page. Okay. So, can you guys see that first question? In your traditions, what do love and neighbors have to do with each other? So I'm going to start a little bit. I'm an old man. I'm 57, and I remember as a kid growing up in a neighborhood where we knew our neighbors. The front door wasn't usually locked, and we were free to sort of move around the neighborhood. And that it just felt like an extended form of home. The neighborhood was an extended home, and so I'd love to hear from everybody else or anybody else about love and neighbors.
When I was younger, it was much the same thing. When you were younger, you didn't leave the house and you knew all your neighbors all over the place. Today, I still leave the house a lot because I'm in the middle of nowhere. But for the past 8-9 years, I have no idea who my neighbors are. They kind of live in their little compound, and I, just ignore them and they ignore me. No.
Yeah.
I think for me, in terms of a neighborhood neighbor, that's what we're talking about specifically.
Yep. At this point, yes.
Neighborhood. It's funny because I think I like all my neighbors, and then I realized that someone's breaking the rules of the HOA, and I live in an HOA for a reason. And then I'm annoyed by them. Doesn't mean I don't love them, but I've never thought of loving neighbors like that. For me, it's more of an appreciation, a tolerance, a likability, but not unconditional love. I mean, it just seems like I don't think in those terms when I think of my neighbors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I actually had the privilege of growing up in a really tight-knit neighborhood as well. And we were in a literal circle.
Nice.
Yeah. And I knew every single one of my neighbors. And there was one other family with kids my age, so we would terrorize everyone. But they knew us, they tolerated us pretty well. And, obviously we tried to respect them. And there were certain neighbors that we liked and certain neighbors that, were old and cranky or whatever, that's how we thought of them as little kids,
Mm-hmm.
And now, as a lot of you know, I just recently moved into an apartment. This is my third apartment experience, and I've never really gotten to know my neighbors except for in one apartment. I like knew one group of people. But I never see anyone. Everyone's very like closed off. And even just the other day, I got Go-Gurt. Like someone gave me Go-Gurt and I don't eat Go-Gurt. I was like, this is weird. And so I was looking for like kids in my neighborhood, in my apartment complex to give it to. And I saw this one kid with his dad. And so I asked his dad, I was like, hey, I got Go-Gurt. I don't eat it. Could your kid use it? And he was like, yeah, that'd be fine. And I was just like, that's a weird response to like a free gift of food for your kid. Like neither one of them said thanks. And yeah, it's just very awkward. Like everyone seems to be closed off to people that they don't know and don't want to know their neighbors. And it feels at times a little scary too. So, I mean, it's just wild to see in a somewhat short amount of time the difference between my childhood and now. Like,
did you say scary?
You know, sometimes it is to me. I mean, I live alone and like I don't feel like it's a terribly scary neighborhood, but every once in a while, like I have this neighbor who even now is playing incredibly loud music and they play it all the way until 5 a.m. in the morning. And I do not have the guts to go down there and knock on the door because I don't know what's on the other side. You know, maybe that's just me being like a little pansy.
Well, is it at least good music?
All I can hear is just this bass thumping, and I even put in earplugs and I can still hear it. So that's beside the point though. Like I'm just saying like the difference between like my childhood where I knew every one of my neighbors by name, and now I don't even have the courage to like knock on someone's door to ask them to turn their music down because I've had prior experiences asking people to like, you know, turn their music down or whatever. Like people get angry and mean and scary. And I mean, I'm not saying that these neighbors would because I don't know, but I'm not willing to find.
Yeah.
You need an arsonist.
I mean,
there may be
No.
there may be smaller incremental changes that can be made. Right?
Yeah, I have a plan. It's okay. And it's a safe plan.
I'll
Don't
just
necessarily involve a flamethrower.
I'll put it out there. Just you're a friend. I'll give you a great rate.
Thanks, Rick. You got my back.
I do. That's why I'm here.
Lindsay, I was just going to say, if only you knew somebody that, I don't know, what do they call those people that helps you buy homes? A realtor or something like that?
Gee, I wonder who that could be.
Yeah, really.
Me too.
Hit me up in a year since I just barely moved in here.
Well, I'm sure if trying to burn the place down, they'll kick your ass out pretty fast.
So she came back.
No,
Yeah.
The people in my
that's,
building think I'm scary, apparently, Lindsay. So I can maybe help you.
See,
Maybe
oh, okay. Let's see.
I'll show them what scary is.
All right, Jeffrey, go ahead.
Yes. All right. Okay. Let's go to this one. Lindsay, in your experience, is having a bad neighbor anything like learning how not to love? So one of the things that's been running through my brain is the idea that in today's culture, the way we learn about our neighbors is because they're being a bad neighbor. As a kid, the culture seemed to be when someone moved into the neighborhood, there was sort of a competition about who was going to be the best neighbor, right? Who was going to bring cookies over first, or who was going to bring a pie, or who was going to, be the quickest to be a good neighbor. And today, I feel like the reason I know my neighbors is because either they think I'm a bad neighbor or I think they're a bad neighbor, right? I haven't brought in my garbage cans quick enough, or my lawn is too long, or vice versa. You know, they're doing something that's annoying me. And so how is that like learning how not to love?
I think for me, it's the opposite of, because if you think of love in terms of service, you know, as a Christian, I'm washing another person's feet kind of service. So to me, that would be almost the opposite of that. You know, that I learn how not, you know, that teaches me, you know, I see what you're saying. It's like how not to love, although I would turn that question around because I think you should
Yeah,
love
sure.
regardless, not love.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Well,
I get where you're going with that.
yeah, well, yeah, you know, I think the whole thing of fear is an important piece, right? Because if we can't even have a conversation, how do we get anywhere near love?
Yeah.
And
I feel like that's what I was trying to get at. And like the way
yeah,
you described getting to know your neighbors now is like not who's the good neighbor, but who's the bad neighbor. Maybe scary. I feel like I feel like I regret saying that word, but
no, no, I think it's don't well, I'm not going to tell you what to not regret, but you know, but we in our own experience, we had uh, we had neighbors who complained to the HOA about us because we had an American flag up, and you know, we're renting, so it's not like the complaint doesn't just go to us; it goes to our landlord, and you know, and that whole thing. It's you know, and we don't like the feeling of living in a place where we feel like people are out to get us.
I stopped it just so we could look at
Oh,
each other better.
yeah, yeah, thank you. Thanks. Um, is that, I mean, is that kind of where you're coming from, Lindsay? That same sort of idea?
I mean, yeah, I think so. And I mean, it's for me, I feel like everything's always an internal battle as well. Like I'm
Yes.
trying to evaluate myself and my own actions and maybe possible prejudices, you know, or, you know, just fear, you know, but so like I'm trying to balance that with also not
Right.
acting recklessly because I mean I have past experience that tells me if I go and complain to this neighbor, they're going to hate me and they're going to know where I live and
Yeah.
you know. So I mean, yeah, it's balancing the two. But it getting back to that question that was on the slide, like it feels like I'm not focusing on loving my neighbor. I'm focusing on how to not piss them off and just like live in separate silent peace, you know?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, that's not something that I want. I would love to get to know my neighbors and have friends and
Yeah.
feel like, you know, I can go to my next door neighbor if I have a problem. Like that would be really nice, but I just don't feel like that's kind of how our society is operating and generally speaking, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess the question then becomes, is that something that we can change on, you know, on a neighborhood basis? Can I impact the 9 people who I share walls with um, somehow?
Theoretically, I would think you could.
Yeah. Uh,
You know?
if my macaroni and cheese is good enough.
Yeah. And it may not start out, it shouldn't probably start out with, because you turn your music down. It should start out first with, hey, I wanted to know my neighbors and just getting to know each other. And so that if a time comes when you do need to ask them to turn the music down, a stranger's not asking, a friend hopefully is the one asking.
Yes. Yeah.
You can go back and share. I just thought,
Yeah, thank you. No, that was good.
bring it down.
Yeah, I'll try to be more aware of that.
I don't know if mom and dad can see the group when they've got the full screen.
Oh, sure. Okay. All right. So let's see here. Okay. Oh, no, 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 no. Okay. All right. What is one tip you have learned about what it is to be loved?
Always paying cash.
Oh, stop that. Okay, always paying cash. I like that. Aldi's is my favorite store, and they've recently gone to only one human cashier, and it's the person who takes cash. So I've started bringing cash to Aldi's
Yeah.
so that I'm not qualified to use the robot checkers.
Now, do you like Aldi's?
I do. I like that I can get in and out of there in 10 minutes.
All right. All right.
I know where everything is, and I know the things I like, and I get in there and I buy them and I'm out.
Nice.
In my building, being a good neighbor is unfortunately being the one that says, hey, do you really have to run that person down for the fact that they don't want to show up to building meetings?
Ouch.
Is it really necessary? So I don't really care what my neighbors think of me.
Uh-huh. Okay. But
Some of them are very nice. Some of
Yeah.
them are, and then there's a bunch of them that are are just they're bullies, bottom line. And there's a woman in here that they like to, and she's a lot. Yeah,
uh-huh.
she is a lot. But they like to bully her in particular. And no one should have to walk into a building meeting, and when they walk in here, oh great.
Yeah. No,
So that's why I walk in with her, and that's kind of my relationship with my neighbors, is that I don't do
buddy.
anything to violate their rights, and they smile and ask how I'm doing,
Well,
and
what you're describing
because
to me.
I haven't done anything to cross them, but
Yeah.
I'm very aware that I get treatment that the ones that they don't like don't.
Well, what strikes me about what you're telling us is that you're helping your neighbors to not be unneighborly in a way.
I guess.
I like
I
that
like
very
to think
much.
that I'm helping to create a safer space for the people that are, because it's never going to be safe, unfortunately. A
Well,
safer space for the people that they've decided that they don't like, and that they're going to be mean to. But I don't like that I have to take on that role either. I mean, I will, because screw them, screw the bullies. I don't like that they're doing that, and everybody has rights that should be respected. And if they're not going to do that, then unfortunately they're going to get a bit of my
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
they're going to get a bit of pushback from me.
Yeah, sure.
someone
Yeah.
has to stand up and stand in solidarity as well, but creating that safe space, like you're saying, I think if we're not in school anymore, so there's not a
Right.
teacher that somebody can call on to come, clear the space of whatever bad juju's going on. And then, so we have to do it,
Yeah. Well,
But that is this particular building in a very small town.
yeah. The one of the ways I look at that too is that all of us are potentially that one, given the right context.
Yeah. Yes, and some of the bullies have seen that because they will turn on each other.
Mhm,
I'm sure
yeah.
they all know that they're the one that's being talked about when they're not in the room, but they're bored and they have nothing to do. This
Yeah, that is sad.
And I found
it's
that being a
it's just
bully,
yeah.
being bullied myself in the years, that usually the bullies are hurting for some reason as well. But we, until we can get into a level of trust to get to know them, they'll just continue to be that as well. But they need it just as much. They need that compassion to, help them through whatever it is that is making them that way.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Any other the heart of this question about tips about what it is to love is I realized at one point that beloved can also be a feeling, right? If I have a beloved but they don't feel like they're being loved, that's I'm doing a bad job of toward my beloved. Does that make sense? Do I need a whiteboard? No. So beloved, right? If you are beloved, then you would feel loved. And so I'm not good at it, and maybe that's why I have to put it in words. Um, but I want those I love to feel loved. I'm sensitive to that. I want them to feel loved. Any other thoughts on this point? All right. So this video is clearly about a man and a woman. But to me, it's about we, and it doesn't necessarily mean a romantic we, though it can include that. It can also be a communal we, or a team we, or a small group we. Who I am with you doesn't have to be a singular you, right? Who I am with you, all of you, uh, is different than I would be by myself. You all help round my sharp edges. You teach me things that I wouldn't know otherwise, and you give me a place to do the same for you. And that's what I think Ekklesia is about. And I want to tell you about the first day that I met Michelle. And we don't have to go to the PowerPoint. I can tell you this. I'd been in seminary since August of 22, and we did all our classes online, and we're writing from the depths of our souls about theological things and personal things and childhood things to teeny little dots on the screen.
Nice, Tom.
And so I'm thinking, finally in January I'm going to meet some of these people. And Michelle and I and Scott and Logan were 4 students in the first block. For 3 days we were together with the coolest teacher. Professor Davis, and we were talking about the most, well, I won't go that. We were talking about church governance, right? It was not exciting material, but we had a blast getting to know each other. And as one of our first assignments was to describe our context, where we were in ministry. And as Michelle was talking about Ekklesia and about the fact that you all met in circles and that you had been meeting in living rooms and now you were meeting online, I was barely containing myself. I was smiling from ear to ear. Could not wait to tell Michelle how excited I was for what she was doing and how I wanted to be a part. And she was gracious enough to invite me to be on that one Sunday, and you know, and we had great conversations about Ekklesia. We continue to have great conversations, and I'm blessed and excited and thrilled that you guys have allowed me in your circle.
And I have to add something to this story.
Okay, go ahead.
Because from my vantage point, I didn't realize just how intrigued and excited he was about it until the professor said, we're going to break for the day and I want to pair you up. She didn't even get to what the assignment of pair you up was going to be. He was making eye contact with me across the table. He was apparently stay in his chair. He was jumping around like a kid that just really had to go pee or something.
Yes.
Like, are we gonna pair up? Because I really want to do this project with Ekklesia.
Yes. Yes.
It was amazing to see how excited somebody was at this, what we were doing. It was concept to my class, but it, you know, obviously we've been doing this for 3 years at that point. So yes, it was fun.
And then he got to know you.
Yes, and it's only been better ever since. It's only been better ever since.
That's one term.
Yes, but the history and the context for my excitement goes back to 1987 when I discovered another version of the gospel. I was raised in a Catholic home, in a Catholic context, and so my dad's family were Portuguese Catholic. So if we went to Dad's family church, the whole service was in Portuguese. So I didn't know what was happening. Right? It could have been Latin, but I think it was Portuguese. And if we went to Mom's side, it was in English. And I was amazed at all the pointers, right? The whole building pointed to something greater and something bigger. But when we got to the parking lot, all of that was forgotten because everybody wanted the first position out of the parking lot. And so that was a mixed message for me. And at 16, I stopped going to church because, well, there are multiple reasons. But I had an experience at 13 that sort of colored the rest of my life up to this point. And at 16, sitting in church, I wasn't looking at the pointers anymore. I was looking at the people. And I knew that wasn't right. Why am I going to do that? So my parents gave me permission to not go anymore. So I took a job working at a coffee shop on Saturdays and Sundays instead. But in my early 20s, I was on my way into a gay bar, and a guy gave me a tract about Jesus. And we didn't have a long conversation. But the idea that there was another way to interact with God was sort of started something new in me. I went to a bookstore and bought a copy of the Bible called The Book. I don't know if some of you remember it, but it was like, it was before the Message, but it was sort of a paraphrase, very easy to read, no these and thous, just telling the story. And wasn't called the Bible. The front cover said The Book. And I started reading that. And shortly after that, I was invited by one of my neighbors who heard Christian music coming out of my car to a Bible study that she went to on Sunday nights at Miller's Dutch Kitchen. Now, Miller's Dutch Kitchen was open here for 30 years. It was a Mennonite restaurant, but they were always closed on Sunday nights. And Frank, the owner, had a meeting there on Sunday nights, and anybody was welcome. We called it a Bible study because we did read the Bible, but we also sang songs together. We shared with each other what was going on in our lives. We prayed for each other, and most nights we had pie.
And more? Pie?
So whether it was Amish pie or whether we went to Perkins afterwards, there was pie. So that was nice. But it was a family. It was not my chosen family, but these were people who I spent Sunday nights with, and it was 2 or 3 hours. And at first there were about 7 or 8 of us. It was fairly small. Almost everybody else was Mennonite, but there were a couple folks who didn't have any religious experience or affiliation before that. They were just people who knew Frank from the restaurant and had started coming to the Bible study. And I loved being there. I loved getting to know these people and letting them get to know me. It was, like I said, it was like the late 80s and mid to late 80s. And AIDS was becoming a thing. And I hadn't told any of them that I was gay. I hadn't even really used the word to describe myself at that point. But when it came time to ask for prayer, I asked them to pray for me because I was going to get an HIV test that next day. And when they prayed, call it Holy Spirit, call it the shivers, call it the heebie-jeebies, it was something was going on. And that next Sunday, everybody asked me, how'd the test go? I don't know. And I'm like, don't know. It takes 2 weeks. At that time, it was 2 weeks. But the fact that they asked was awesome to me because it was the feeling of family was mutual. They really did care. And we stayed together as a group for about 4 years. Eventually, I left to go to Massachusetts, and there were that was a mixed bag, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But in that 4 years, we grew from 7 or 8 to 60 people, and so at about 30, the small family atmosphere was sort of diminishing. So we read a book by Ralph Naber called Future Church that talked about cells multiplying. And so we split into 4 different groups. And so from that original 8, 2 of us each got 2 would get a group. And Roland was my assistant, and I was in charge of the group at 27, which was crazy. But I had but I had four lovely ladies who were sort of surrogate grandmas, who didn't mind that I didn't know where a verse was, or didn't know about something else, and they were very supportive, and great prayers, and yeah, so it was a great time. And the eight of us would get together once a month. The original would get together once a month, just because we missed being together. And we would talk about how the groups were going, and support each other, and that kind of stuff. But it was the change from being somebody in the circle to somebody responsible for a circle was tough for me, because I was coming to understand that there were places where I didn't love myself as much as I was being loved. And that made me uncomfortable. And so part of my reason for going was to pursue med school, but also part of my reason for going was because I needed to reconcile this this dissonance in myself. Those ladies were trusting me in a way that I didn't trust myself yet. And so this is another way, I think, that loving our neighbors is adds to the mix, because sometimes I'm gonna bring up the slide at this point. Is that the right? No. I'm gonna get good at this, Michelle, eventually. There we go.
You need me to vamp?
It's a very cool background, though.
Oh, here we go. This is the one I want. So sometimes loving our neighbors helps us to know how to love ourselves. That was definitely happening at the beginning. Sometimes our neighbors loving us helps us to know how to love ourselves. And sometimes loving ourselves helps us to know how to love our neighbors. So, my time with Frank's group did help me to love myself in ways that I didn't know how. It helped me to love neighbors in ways I didn't know how, but it also brought me to a place where one of the parables says they didn't have root in themselves. I didn't have root in myself. So does anybody have a story they want to tell about loving neighbors or loving yourself in that interaction? Yes, sir. Roy.
When we started today, I interpreted neighbor as people who live around me. The interesting part of that is I live on a ranch outside town. We have some neighbors, but they're not close in. And I thought, well, what does loving my neighbors mean to me?
Yeah.
And as we've gone on, I've come to see my neighbor as people further out than just next door. Or I've learned a lot about loving my neighbor from Michelle. I remember we were driving one day, and we were going into this shopping center, and there was a street person standing there with a sign that said he needed help. And Michelle knew him from past experiences. She rushed into the store and bought things for him and rushed out of the store, and he was gone. And she was heartbroken because she had been denied the chance to love her neighbor. Well, that gave me a wake-up call. My neighbor is everybody.
Yes, sir.
It's the person who carries your groceries out for you. It's the person who waits on you patiently when you're needing something. And sometimes it's inconvenient for them. Loving your neighbor is being alert to the needs of other people. I was in the grocery store several years ago, and this young couple were obviously depending on food stamps because they were counting their food stamps and taking groceries away from the checkout because they didn't have enough food stamps to get the things they needed. And they were the man was holding a baby that was under 1 year old. And I was the next one in line to be checked out. And I saw their dilemma. Here they are using food stamps to get things for the baby and themselves, and not enough food stamps. And thanks to Michelle's alertness, I asked them, the adults, would it be all right if I paid for your groceries today? And I stepped back, and they discussed it. And the woman came over and said, we would be grateful to you to do that. And so I paid for their groceries. They're my neighbor.
Yes.
And after they had paid out, the woman came over and said, could we mow your lawn, or could we do something? And I said, no, thank you, darling. And I should have said yes. I'm angry at myself for saying no. Sure, yeah, I need somebody to mow my lawn. Dorothy won't do it. I was tuned into their need, but I wasn't tuned into their feelings.
Yeah. Well, and it is a need, right? The need to be a good neighbor is a need.
Yeah. I tell you, I quite often, since Michelle taught me, I quite often give gifts to street people. Because I remember I could be in that place.
Yes.
I could be the one out there on the street begging for help. Actually, there are thousands of ways to love your neighbor. I always tip the person who brings out my groceries. I just can't accept that gift without tipping them. And it's a significant tip generally. I try to do something like 10% of my groceries. Well, the Lord has blessed me in a million ways and continues to do it.
Yes.
And loving your neighbor is listening to other people, taking the time to hear what they have to say, or being aware of other people's needs. Robert gave me a car to drive when we went to the Ekklesia retreat the first time. What a gift that was. What a gift, Robert. I'll never forget your generosity, and I'll love you forever. I'll tell you, being in Ekklesia here just has alerted me to the sweetness and kindness of these people. I've just come to love all of you. I'll never forget Rick drove Jim and Tracy over here to see us one time, all the way from South Carolina to the panhandle of Texas. He drove them in his car. Bless your heart. I'll tell you, Rick, that meant so much to me.
It was my honor, and to think that I did it nonstop on one tank of gas. I would do that anytime.
I could go on and on. I'm a preacher,
Yes,
so sometimes I forget how to stop. I love you, and I thank you all for this session.
thank you, sir. Thank you.
I think he did land on something that is hard for me. And I didn't realize that I was doing it until another pastor friend actually brought it to my attention, and that at times in our, I think I'll speak for me, in my, how do I phrase this? In my, I don't need compliments. I don't need that kind of reassurance. But people will share their gratitude, and it's a way of being loving to me. But when I say, oh, what is it waiters say these days? My pleasure, or
No problem.
nothing, no problem. We're denying the other person the chance to be loving. We're taking away that moment where we can complete that moment of love.
Circuit. It's a circuit, right? It's like electricity.
It is. Yeah. And by not being present and just saying thank you and accepting that gift from them, we're denying them.
Yes.
And I didn't realize that, I certainly wouldn't want to take anything away from somebody. I thought I was being, not needy. And yet at the same time, I didn't realize that I was, pulling that away from the other person. And so I'm having to work on that, because somehow that habit has been ingrained in me through the years, through my adult years. Dad talks of the years when I was really a nice person.
When was that?
Anyway, so that's something that's hard for me to remember to do is,
Yeah.
is being fully present in the moment someone gives you that gift and that thanks you and that kind of thing, because I was not doing that for somebody.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Roy.
You know, let me just jump in here for just a moment. I've never seen that side of you, Michelle, where you didn't fail to show expression and gratitude for what people do to you. You might not think it's enough, but there's a fine line between giving and showing someone gratitude and it almost being done in a mocking way, almost a sarcastic way. When you thank someone for something or someone does something for you, your thanks and your gratitude toward them are real and heartfelt. I don't know how you think it isn't enough, but it's very touching. It's sufficiently touching to make it seem like you're sincere. You know that.
Nice. Make it seem like I'm sincere.
You thought I was going to get through this whole thing and not hold on. So, but I think you're being a little. My point is you're being a little hard on yourself, I think.
Well, thank you, Rick, for sharing that. I'm glad that I haven't done that to you, apparently. But
well, I've just learned to look the other way.
I try to be more cognizant of it anyway. And I think it is a habit of maybe our culture to do that.
Be humble, right?
Be humble, yeah. Okay, Jeffrey, go ahead.
All right, good. Yep. This is a father and daughter song, but I think it speaks to how loving our neighbor can help us love ourselves unconditionally.
You got all that emotion that's heaving like an ocean, and you're drowning in a deep, dark well. I can hear it in your voice that if you only had a choice, you would rather be anyone else. I love you just the way that you are. I love the way you made your precious heart. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. I know it's hard to hear it when that anger in your spirit is pointed like an arrow at your chest. When the voices in your mind are anything but kind, and you can't believe your father knows best. I love you just the way that you are. I love the way he's shaping your heart. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Well, how does it end when the war that you're in is just you against you against you? Gotta learn to love, learn to love, learn to love your enemies too. You can't expect to be perfect, it's a fight you gotta forfeit. You belong to me, whatever you do. So lay down your weapon, darling, take a deep breath and believe that I love you. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Gotta learn to love, learn to love, learn to love your enemy. Gotta learn to love, learn to love, learn to love your enemies too.
Any thoughts? Right off the bat?
That was very powerful, wasn't it?
I caught something. I've seen that video before. It's been a while, a few years, but I caught something this time that I missed the first time, where he's talking about ourselves. I can't remember how the lyric went, but it was
The war is you against you
war
against
is
you.
you against you against you against you, and then loving your enemies was following that. And I never connected myself and the damage we do to ourselves as the enemy, learning to love my enemy as learning to love myself. I hadn't connected those dots from that video before. At least that's where I took it today.
Yeah. It kind of goes back to what Sarah was saying about protecting that one, right? I have places in myself that I consider that one. And how do I speak to that part of me? How do I treat that part of me? And when I'm harsh to those parts of myself, that harshness can't help but spill over onto other people who have those same qualities, or that remind me of those same qualities. And so learning to love our neighbors in spite of a thing that offends us, or that challenges us, is a bridge to doing the same for ourselves.
I have a hard time loving my enemies. In politics, which we see a lot of,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not particularly loving of people with a different point of view. I know that's not right, but I'll tell you, I think it's so important. I'm glad we're having this conversation, because we do need to love our enemies too. I think Jesus loved his enemies. And I'm sure he prayed for them. But that gummit, it's just hard, isn't it?
Yeah,
People
it is.
with the different attitude. And I think I've got a good attitude, and they have a wrong attitude. Well, that may be right, or it may be incorrect. But I think we need to love our enemies. We need to love people who are difficult, and we need to love those in our own household and show respect and compassion to them. Sometimes the loneliest people are the most taken advantage of, live with us. And we need to wake up to that.
Thank you.
It's hard to love someone when the result of who they are or what they believe in causes pain to others. And they are aware of that, but yet don't moderate their positions. And in fact, blame the people who are being hurt the most. Those are the folks it's hardest to love. In fact, what's also hardest to even have that conversation with why do you believe that? Because you find it so hard to think that how can somebody be this cold or this callous or just this mean? And yet they are. And if you try and talk to them about it, you become a snowflake and a bunch of other derogatory terms. So you learn just to keep quiet, which is actually the worst thing we can do.
Yeah.
But conversations can't happen in a vacuum.
In some ways, to know that it's love to know that it's love is to go past that point, Rick. If it never challenges, because if it never challenges me, if it never costs me anything, if it's always delightful, that could just be me doing what I want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's easier to love someone who does things that you don't agree with when they at least want to talk about it. They can still keep their position. They can still keep their position, but you start by making a conversation. But if the people that you want to contact don't want to have that conversation, or that look at you with the same contempt, it's hard to bridge that gap. And I think that's where we are today.
Well, and isn't that what Ekklesia is doing, right? Is providing a place for people who are willing to talk about their position with people who don't have that same position.
Or as we call the wrong ones. Or as we call the wrong ones.
This is something that comes up a lot for me sometimes, because it's a I don't want to make it all about politics, but it was a part of the reason I left some of the political groups I did after the 2016 election, because people were saying, but we're all sisters and brothers in this, and we're all going to move forward. And where here's an event that we're having, and everyone is welcome, and everyone is welcome. It's like, but not everyone is welcome, are they? Because the people that don't agree with you aren't welcome. And they said, well, there's good reasons for that, and they said, well, there's good reasons for that, and you know that, and you know that. And I said, no, you can't do that. If your group's thing is going to be everyone's welcome and everyone's welcome, you got to live that way. You can't.
Right.
I'm not saying it's easy.
Right.
So, but one of the and stop me if I've talked about this here already. One of the best friendships that I ever had, and unfortunately I'm not in contact with him anymore, was with a man whose political opinions were 180 to mine. We disagreed on just about everything politically. Once the rules of engagement about how we were going to once the rules of engagement about how we were going to talk about it was established,
Yeah.
He learned a lot about why I believe the way that I did. He learned a lot about why I believe the way that I did, and I learned a lot about why he believed it the way that he did. As long as we could talk about it respectfully, and it wasn't always easy. As long as we could talk about it respectfully, and it wasn't always easy. We had to check each other a lot. I learned that and it wouldn't be the. I learned that it's something you. And it wouldn't be the. It's something you have to be very careful and very conscious about. But we learned that on some things we weren't quite as far away as we originally thought. We were never going to agree on everything. On some issues, we were never going to agree on everything. That's for sure. But we weren't quite so far away. Very eye-opening. On a lot of it, it was very, very eye-opening. I actually the politics that are going on now. I miss the politics that are going on now. I miss having him as a sounding board because he taught me a lot about what media source and reading things critically, and not just what media source and media sources, and not just Fox News, which is what he read a lot, but bounced across the spectrum. Bounced across the spectrum. Here's what else I'm reading, and here's some stuff. Here's what else I'm reading, and here's some stuff that you should consider too, and not just the far right, Sarah, but on your side too. The ones that are bounced. Have a look at these two, and ask yourself some questions. So it's possible. It's not easy, but
it's totally worth it.
Possible. Yes.
And it's totally worth it.
Yes, absolutely worth it. I learned so much.
My late brother-in-law, my late brother-in-law out in Utah, disagreed about everything. Disagreed about everything. That said, we had some of the most amazing conversations. We didn't between us. Change each other's minds. We didn't always change each other's minds. But the depth of the conversations, context and respect, would give you context and respect. That whatever animosity, and also because of that, whatever animosity that you could have had, never leaked into anything else. That was
nice. Yes.
So nice. That was a nice. Try to do it like you're wrong, nah. And we didn't try to do it like you're wrong, nah. It's help me understand why you think.
If we take it to the absurd, if we take it to the absurd with somebody else, if I agree completely with somebody else, one of us is redundant, right? Yes. So we're all individuals, right? We're all individuals. The universe is painting the universe is painting a multi-dimensional, multicolored picture with all of us. For the math geeks, the number pi has an infinite series of digits. That never repeat. Why would any one of us, why would any one of us be a repeat of somebody else?
I think Robert had something to add.
Yes, Yes, Robert. Thank you. Yes.
I was just listening and trying to get
Thank
my
you.
picture.
I was just
listening and trying to get my picture to move out of the way. But the two most powerful computers in the world have been calculating pi past 10 billion decimal places. And do you know how many decimal places NASA uses?
I don't.
9. Because that's what the calculators use.
Okay.
So much for math history.
That tells us a lot. That's funny. Thank you.
Touche.
Yes. Well, we're closing up on 8:30. Is there anybody who has anything they haven't shared yet or would like to share? I think that this conversation certainly feeds back on Michelle's original question about changing the tenet to love unconditionally. One thing we,
Go ahead.
oh, well, one thing we didn't get to, but Michelle and I have been taking class together, and one of the introductions was to tell our classmates about a non-human sibling. So, so we didn't talk about non-human neighbors, but we do have them, and so that's another way to come at this some other time.
Yeah, I think we could turn this into a 10-part series. Lindsay's nodding her head. I'm going to share one thing before we close, and maybe Jeff, if you'll take us out. Didn't you have a third video? We could use that.
I do have a third video. I'll take us out with the third video.
Okay.
Yes.
I want to share something that was shared on Facebook. I shared it out because it finally hit me. I've been, you know, trying to figure out what course of education to do, and what do I, how do I see myself in the world, but also in the world in ministry. And this summed it up for me the other day, because some of you know Marlene, who's been on our retreats, but Marlene and I were talking about peacemaking, and she was trying to help me get to a more specific place and of what I wanted to do. And I said, I see myself in a peacemaking role. And she said, in policy? I said, well, I wouldn't rule out policy, but that's not where I see myself at the moment. I just peacemaking, but I couldn't articulate it. And this, I thought, did it so beautifully. Peacemaking doesn't mean passivity. It is the act of interrupting injustice without mirroring it, the act of disarming evil without destroying the evildoer, the act of finding a third way that is neither fight nor flight, but the careful, arduous pursuit of reconciliation and justice. And this was the part that I just loved so much, that it is about a revolution of love that is big enough to set both the oppressed and the oppressors free.
Absolutely.
And I just thought that is, for me, that says it all. And I just had to share it.
Thank you. Yeah, I love that.
Well, thank you all for your contributions and your sharing tonight. Jeffrey, thank you for the time you put into this. You did way more than I anticipated, and I appreciate everything that you brought. Lots of things. I've got several notes written down of things I don't want to forget, things that folks have shared and said tonight. And I will, before we go out, I would like to bring to our thoughts and to prayers for the week what your prayer requests are. Tom has had to leave to go to sleep. I don't know if you noticed that he has lost a lot of weight. He's probably lost 20 pounds, and he asked for our prayers as well, but for healing, but also for wisdom by his medical team. And he is had a PET scan and is looking this week to get those results and the next course of treatment for himself. And so if you will continue to hold him in your meditations. And also, Sarah, how is your father doing?
He's home and not quite determined to act like nothing has happened, but pretty much. We'll see how long that lasts.
Is he accepting yours and your sister's help? Because I know he was kind of Is that what you're referring to?
He's accepted that he's accepted the healthcare worker that we have in twice a week, but he's still absolutely determined to drive. So, and there's not a lot we can do about that.
Okay. And we continue to keep those that have asked for it, Jonna and Bryant Camp, as they help support their family. And then those that are traveling, Jim and Tracy, Ranu, Nantha, for we want them to come back safely into our midst. Anyone else have prayer requests? All right. Well, I will close us in a quick word of prayer, and then Jeffrey will listen to Perfectly Loved. God of love, source of love, we just thank you. Because without love, we are nothing. We are lost. And Lord, sometimes while it's hard to express unconditional love, we know that it is possible, and you showed us that it can be done. And I just pray, Lord, that as we go forth this week, that your love be front and center in our actions and how we receive love from others as much as we give, and that we receive it and give it to ourselves as much as we give to others. Lord, I just pray for peace as well, and comfort for those who are hurting at this moment, that you would be with them and let them know that they are loved. In your name we pray. Amen.
I'm gonna go check your pajamas.
Is that coming through?
Who said that you
Is that coming through?
It just started.
Okay.
were beautiful and that you didn't belong in your own skin? Who said that you were all alone and that you're never gonna find love again? So many little words, so many little lies that have followed you all of your life. Looking for the truth, look into your eyes, and you'll see it's been there the whole time. Ooh, even when you were running, even when you were hiding, never been a moment that you were not perfectly loved. When you barely believed it, when your eyes couldn't see it, every single moment you've always been perfectly loved. Ooh, perfectly loved. You've always been perfectly in the hands of the infinite, as the wounds of the world became his. See the kindness heaven has for you, and now he's always been drawing you in. So many open doors, so many open doors, so many miracles, so many that have followed you all of your life. Looking for the truth, looking for the truth, look into your eyes, and you'll see it's been there the whole time. Ooh, even when you were running, even when you were hiding, never been a moment that you were not perfectly loved. When you barely believed it, when your eyes couldn't see it, every single moment you've always been perfectly loved. Ooh, perfectly loved. Ooh, you're not a problem. You're not a mistake. Don't need fixing or solving. In the arms of his grace,
Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a great week, everybody.